My fiancé told her ex he was the love of her life 3 days before our wedding, and I found out that she was choosing him over me, so I disappeared without a trace. I was born on a Tuesday afternoon, according to what my father told me, in a semi-improvised hospital room because part of the electrical system had been damaged that day. Perhaps that detail never caught my attention too much, except when I think about how chaotic my arrival into the world was. My mother, still young, was not very convinced of being a mother, or, at least, that is what the stories my father told me later suggest. He said that she held me in her arms without conviction, as if I were an object that someone had forgotten in her hands. I never grew up with her affection. In fact, my mother decided to leave when I had barely learned to walk, to start another family with someone else. She left without saying goodbye, or, perhaps, she said goodbye when I could not understand words and only understood sensations. My father, on the other hand, was there. He did not have much experience with babies, but he sustained my life as best he could. He worked rotating shifts to pay for a small apartment and my care. Sometimes, as he told me, days would pass when he was so exhausted that he would fall asleep with his work clothes on, while I played with some wooden blocks near his feet. Growing up, I understood the magnitude of his effort. He was a man who had been left behind by the woman he loved, and, still, he never gave up. He never spoke ill of my mother, but he did not lie to me either. He told me that she decided not to be part of my life, that one day she packed a suitcase and left, leaving a brief note with cold words and an uncertain future. My father cried for a while, as I learned from my uncles, until he understood that if he sank into sadness, I would not have real support. I remember my first years in school as a confusing time. I saw the other children with their mothers, and I felt strange. I was a shy child, a little insecure, who was surprised that the others spoke of mom with normality. It was hard for me to explain why she was not in my life. When I tried to say something, I was met with looks of curiosity or compassion, and that made me feel fragile. I had a couple of friends who accepted me as I was, but in a way, I isolated myself with my books. My father, although he loved me unconditionally, was noticeably very tired when night came. He could not dedicate as much time to me as he would have liked, but at least he sat with me for dinner and asked how my day at school had been. Over the years, the questions about my mother became more concrete in my mind. Why had she left? Did she not love me? My father, not wanting to hurt me, told me that the reasons were complicated, that maybe she was not ready to be a mother. I, in my childish view, assumed that I was not enough to keep her. Then, without realizing it, I began to push myself in everything, in sports, in studies, in extracurricular activities. I had the need to stand out, to be perfect, to see if that way she would ever turn to look at me. It was like a craving for recognition that I could not satisfy. Every time I did something brilliant, I wondered if she would find out, if some rumor of my success would reach her ears and make her regret leaving me. That kind of silent dependence on being liked and chosen was intensified in adolescence, when I began to experience interest in girls. It was very difficult for me to approach them, not out of pure shyness, but because I carried within me a colossal fear of rejection. I suppose that, deep down, I feared that any girl I liked would end up following in my mother's footsteps and abandon me when I became attached. So my strategy was to excel academically. I became #1 in the classroom, won math contests, and in high school, I obtained honor mentions. My father was proud, but sometimes he looked at me with a hint of concern, as if he noticed that I was putting too much pressure on myself. He tried to remind me that personal value does not depend only on achievements, but also on inner happiness. Still, I could not help it. I needed to fill myself with diplomas to compensate for the lack of maternal affection. The time came to apply to university, and I opted for a very prestigious one that granted full scholarships to outstanding students. I took the tests and sent my academic record, crossing my fingers tightly. When the acceptance letter arrived with the confirmation of a 100% scholarship, I felt on top of the world. I remember my father crying with joy and hugging me in the kitchen, saying that he was proud of me and that he wished my mother knew how far her son had come. Perhaps that moment was one of the happiest of my life. I felt that, at least, I could be a source of pride for a selfless father, and that, in some corner of the planet, maybe my mother would also find out and acknowledge me. University was a huge change, new people, demanding professors, and the pressure to maintain the scholarship. But I adapted quickly. I enrolled in several study groups to enrich my knowledge and meet people with aspirations similar to mine. It was in one of those groups that Laura, my future fiancée, appeared. She was my age and had a brilliant intellect, as well as a serene beauty. She had her hair up in a ponytail and wore glasses with a simple frame. From the moment I saw her present a research paper, her way of speaking caught my attention, the confidence with which she defended her points. Later, when we chatted for the first time, I discovered that she also had a sharp sense of humor. In a single afternoon, I felt a connection that I had not experienced until then. Laura and I coincided in many university activities, from laboratory projects to extracurricular conferences. We discussed philosophy, politics, art, and we would spend hours in the cafeteria talking, forgetting the clock. With her, for the first time, I felt that I did not need to pretend anything, that I could relax that part of me that was always striving to stand out. She herself was an excellent student, with an impeccable grade point average and a charisma that intrigued me more and more. Deep down, I began to think that I had a real chance to feel loved, chosen without conditions. But I was terrified to propose it. It took me several months to gather the courage. One night, after one of those shared study sessions, I walked her to her dorm, as I usually did out of chivalry. I stopped at the threshold and, With my heart about to jump out of my chest, I told her that I felt something more than friendship, that I liked her personality, her intelligence, her smile. Laura looked at me with surprise. She came closer and, without another word, she kissed me on the lips. No words were needed. Her gesture was more explicit than any declaration. She told me she had been waiting for me to make the first move. That moment was liberating. My biggest fear was being rejected, but she chose me. She chose me when she could have been with anyone, because of her talent and her striking looks. That feeling of being the chosen one became very valuable to me. We made our relationship official with the simple label of boyfriend and girlfriend. We saw each other outside of classes for dinner. We went to the movies. We walked through the campus on warm nights, sharing anecdotes or dreams for the future. She would tell me her plans to do a postgraduate degree, her taste for English literature, and I would talk to her about my father, my scholarship, and the deep desire I had to forge a brilliant career. In those days, the idea of my mother faded a bit, because every time I was with Laura, I felt that life was fair, that someone loved me without hesitation. I felt so fulfilled that I stopped obsessing over my mother's absence. Over time, our relationship strengthened. We reached a point where we both knew that we were together seriously, with no intention of looking for anyone else. A year and a half later, I was invited to have lunch at her parents' house. It was the first time I met my future mother-in-law and my future father-in-law. Laura came from a wealthy family, kind people with refined manners. They received me with cordiality, offered me an exquisite lunch, and at the end, congratulated me on my academic excellence. They told me that it was clear that Laura looked happy with me and that if things went well, they would not hesitate to support us. Her father, in particular, mentioned that he had contacts in important companies and that if I needed a push, he could help me. I thanked him, although I did not want to depend on favors. I preferred to feel autonomous and shine on my own merit. Her family also told me that Laura had had a complicated ex-boyfriend. They referred to him as someone wild, very rude, who did not know how to value Laura. I did not want to ask too much, but I was left with some curiosity. Later, alone, Laura revealed to me that ex was a guy with an overflowing character. He liked adrenaline, parties, he lived without rules. For a time, she thought she needed that spark, but she soon realized that her relationship with him was destructive. She ended up moving away and he went on his way. I was left with some unease, thinking about that version of an adventurous man whom, perhaps, she had also loved at some point. However, she told me that she would not go back to him because she understood that she did not want that life. Relief washed over me. Although I was not jealous, the truth is that the idea that she had loved someone so different from me disturbed me. However, I trusted what she told me. She had opted for a more stable life, for a partner with solid aspirations, and there I was, a dedicated man with plans to make our relationship formal. We finished our degrees with honors. She is one of the best of her generation and I with the highest grade in my project. My father came to the ceremony. He cried with emotion while Laura and I went up to receive the medals, and he hugged me tightly. He told me that my mother, if she saw me, would be proud. That comment stirred mixed feelings in me, but I preferred to remain silent. Shortly after, thanks to the recommendation of one of my professors, I got a very promising position in a large consulting firm, with a fairly high salary for my age. It was an incredible leap. Laura, for her part, had offers from some firms where she could develop in marketing and finance. Thus, we became a young, successful couple with a radiant future. Every day, I became more convinced that she was the woman of my life, the person with whom I wanted to grow old. My father saw me so in love that he smiled, as if he were happy that I was breaking the cycle of abandonment that had marked me in my childhood. A couple of months after we settled into our work lives, I told my father that I was thinking of proposing to Laura. He looked at me with a certain nostalgia and said that I seemed very young, but that if I felt sure, he would support me. I told him that I needed a ring worthy of her and a special moment to ask for her hand. So, we organized a dinner at an elegant restaurant, inviting her parents and my father. I had planned to say a few words, remembering our university years, until I reached the moment when I would take the ring out of my pocket. I was very nervous. Laura arrived radiant, completely unaware of what was coming. In the middle of dinner, I stood up and told the table how much Laura meant to me, how she had helped me feel loved, how she had brightened every one of my mornings with her smile. At the end, with a trembling voice, I asked if she wanted to marry me. I took out the ring, knelt beside her, and noticed that her eyes filled with tears. She nodded her head, saying yes, and we melted into a hug. Her parents applauded, moved. My father could not hold back his tears. It was, once again, one of those moments that I felt were full of truth. That night, we returned to our homes knowing that, in the not-too-distant future, a great event would unite us before family and friends. Time passed quickly. We began to organize a wedding that was shaping up to be large, with invitations to co-workers, university classmates, childhood friends, relatives from both sides. Laura was enthusiastic, looking at dresses, booking a hall, and then changing it for another. In the end, the idea of having the ceremony in a cabin in front of a river came up, something romantic and different, and the family agreed. We booked that place, quite far from the city, and invested time and money to make everything perfect, the decoration, the music, the banquet. The days leading up to the big event filled me with adrenaline. My father helped me with the details. I noticed his pride in seeing that his son, the little boy who used to sleep hugging a teddy bear, was now about to get married. I longed with all my might for my mother to see me, but I knew it was a vain wish. We had not had contact in decades. There were just 3 days left until the wedding. Almost all the guests had already arrived in the cabin area, including our former university classmates. Laura was staying in a small hotel with her parents, and I settled in another hotel with my father, following the old tradition of not seeing each other until the moment of the ceremony. However, there was a last-minute matter I needed to confirm with Laura, a detail related to the table distribution or the location of the photo session. I do not even remember what it was. I went to the hotel to talk to her, but when I reached her door, I heard her talking on the phone. Perhaps because of the fine wood of the place, I could hear her words clearly. I am not proud of having stayed to listen, but something in her tone intrigued me. I heard my name once, and I stood still. She was speaking in a low voice, apparently very emotional, and what I heard made my heart fall into an abyss. She was sending a voice message to her ex, that adventurous and wild man, telling him that he had always been the love of her life, that she could not be with him because of their very different lifestyles, but that if he had changed, she would have married him and not me. She also said that she would always love him, that she would treasure him in her heart, but that she needed a stability that he could not offer her. I felt a chill that petrified me. My first impulse was to deny what my ears were picking up. It could not be real. I tried to calm down, but the pain was unbearable. I took a couple of steps back and ran to my room. I collapsed on the bed, crying like I had not cried since I was a child. The person I thought loved me deeply was confessing to her former lover that he was the true love of her life, and that I was just the more stable option. I remembered the old ghosts of my mother, who had also opted for a different family, leaving my father and me behind. I felt that history was repeating itself. Again, I was not enough to be chosen unconditionally. In my desperation, I called my father. I told him, between sobs, what I had heard. He hugged me tightly, and I saw him with a grave expression. He asked me what I wanted to do. I, confused, said that I could not marry someone who did not consider me the love of her life, that I could not bear the idea of being the second option. I asked him, crying, if that was fair. My father just told me to do what my heart dictated, and that he would support me 100%. It was hard for me to believe that 3 days before the wedding I was on the verge of canceling everything. But a voice inside me was screaming that I could not lie to myself. I deserved more than a secondhand love. I decided to write letters to explain my departure. I did not have the courage to face all the people at once or to question Laura and listen to her justify something that was a direct blow to my heart. I wrote a letter for her, another for her parents, another for several of my friends and relatives who had come to the wedding. In them I explained, with sadness, that I had discovered in a painful way that Laura did not see me as the love of her life, that I had heard it from her own lips, mentioning to her ex that he was her true great love. I apologized for the chaos caused and for the humiliation that this meant for everyone involved, but I could not and did not want to tie myself to a lie. I left the letters in my father's hands, with the request that he distribute them the next day. That night, I took my things and left without saying goodbye to anyone, in the car of a friend who helped me get out of that place. The next day was, supposedly, the day before the wedding, the last of the preparations, but when everyone noticed my absence, a great commotion arose. Laura and her family were looking for me, worried, because they did not know where I had gone. My father, with a knot in his heart, delivered the letters. I can imagine the general consternation upon reading them. Laura's parents, as I later found out, were furious with her, asking her what had happened, why she dared to confess something like that to her ex just days before the wedding. She, upon reading my letter, cried inconsolably, understanding that I had heard that confession. I would have liked to see her reaction, not out of sadism, but to understand if she truly regretted it or if she only lamented the scandal. Either way, I was already out of there. My father returned to the city and told me that the wedding had been canceled. Everyone left with the surprise on their shoulders. In my apartment, I locked myself away in a state of lethargy and deep sadness. I turned off my phone, disconnected from social media, and did not even open the door, except to receive the food delivery person. I felt a terrible emptiness, as if I had lost the direction of my life. How could I return to normality? My father, with the love he always gave me, tried to cheer me up, telling me that life sometimes gives us hard blows, but that we cannot stay down. When my boss at work found out about the cancellation of the wedding, he offered me a vacation to recover emotionally. I accepted it, because in that state I could not even concentrate. I spent days without shaving, watching silly movies, trying not to think about the humiliation that overwhelmed me. After a couple of weeks, something inside me pushed me to return to reality. I told myself that I could not live forever in hiding. I went back to work, trying to immerse myself in projects to feel productive. I blocked any contact with Laura's family or with her. I did not want to hear explanations. Several common friends tried to mediate. They said that Laura wanted to talk to me, to explain that it was not all so literal, that she was nervous, that maybe she expressed herself badly, but I did not want to listen. The excuse of nerves was not enough for me, because what I caught in her voice was genuine feeling towards her ex, and that hurt me much more than 1,000 apologies. I dedicated myself to my career with more zeal than before. I began to stand out in the company for my performance and for my dedication outside of work hours. Over time, my boss began to delegate responsibilities to me, and I got a promotion. My father was proud to see me recovering. In a way, I felt, yes, a hole in my chest when I remembered the failed wedding. But I tried to focus on what I could control, my profession, my personal goals, my desire to prove myself capable of achieving great things. Perhaps the only thing that was holding me back emotionally was the reservation I had about romantic relationships. I did not want to get involved with anyone else for the time being. A few months passed, and, at an annual meeting of several companies, I unexpectedly ran into Laura. It was in a conference room, during the coffee break. She saw me and approached me shyly. I felt a lump in my throat, but I also noticed that I was in a different position than before. I felt strong enough to face her. She began to stammer, apologizing and saying that she did not really feel those things, that she was just nostalgic thinking about her ex, and that, in her mind, that call was nothing more than a memory of the past. She claimed that the true love of her life was me, that she had realized her mistake, that she had let herself be carried away by the longing for something that was never functional. Her lips trembled as she begged me to understand her. I listened to her in silence, with a firm gaze. I was no longer the insecure boy who feared rejection, but someone who had understood that he could not accept crumbs of affection. When she finished speaking, I replied without raising my voice, explaining that I did not hate her or blame her for ruining my life, that I understood that sometimes the heart can be divided, but I also told her that her repentance was not enough for me, that I needed to feel that my partner chose me absolutely. I confessed that during my childhood, my mother did not choose me, and when I found a woman to marry, I discovered that I was not her ideal love. For me, that was a confirmation that I was not destined to be the first choice in anyone's life, and I did not want to perpetuate that cycle. I told her that she deserved to find someone to love without being in that dichotomy of stable and exciting, and that I also deserved a woman who harbored no doubts. So I did not intend to resume the relationship. Laura let out a contained cry, and I comforted her so that we would not draw attention in the middle of the event, but I did not change my position. We said goodbye with a rather sad hug, and I went on my way. I felt a strange relief, as if I had finally closed an open wound. I realized that I needed that meeting to conclude the chapter. From then on, I promised myself that I would not again seek the desperate validation of someone to make me feel loved. I learned that, although I wish to be the first choice, that does not always happen, but that does not mean I should settle for the second. I understood that love, to work, requires mutual determination, not half measures. Today I maintain a calm life, focused on my career and on taking care of my father. From time to time, he visits me and we talk about the past. I do not deny it. Sometimes I long for the illusion of the wedding and the dream of forming my own family, but I remember that, if there was not full love, that wedding would have been a prison for my heart. I convinced myself that it is better for me to wait for a person who chooses me without hesitation. I am not close to falling in love, but I no longer run after anyone's approval. If my mother did not love me, if Laura preferred someone else, I cannot change it, but I can't avoid living in the anguish of begging for affection. Every day I get up, look in the mirror, and remind myself that my worth does not depend on the decisions of others, that my father taught me to work hard, and that, when someone who truly loves me comes along, I will know how to recognize it without questioning if I am the second option. Sometimes I think that life gave me that test to heal all the wounds of my childhood in one fell swoop. I was not born to be told, maybe you are the one. I want whoever is by my side to know for sure that they choose me with all their heart. And, in the meantime, I dedicate myself to being the best I can be as a person, to helping my father, to thriving in my work. Perhaps, in the future, my children will hear my story and understand that love is not a consolation prize, but a bond of sincerity. I prefer to wait and form something genuine than to marry for convenience, or because it is comfortable. One can have fears, hesitations, but loving is an act that demands transparency. Now I know that, and that is enough for me to face each new dawn without the weight of guilt or the anxiety of believing that I must be perfect to deserve love. Life goes on. I walk confidently, without resentment, but with the conviction that I will only stay where I feel I am truly appreciated. And if what I am is not enough for someone, I will not insist on convincing them of my value. We people have the right to our preferences, but I also have the right not to live in the shadows of another love. That is the lesson this experience left me with. The humility to recognize that I cannot force anyone to choose me, but I also should not cling to something that does not belong to me. I am a man who, after a complicated past, has understood that love is only love when both parties take it as a non-negotiable priority. I will hold on to that truth, and to the hope that later on that person will come who does not compare me with anyone and gives me the place I have always dreamed of. Only then will I know that it was worth the wait, free of burdens and ready for a future that, at last, makes me feel like the luckiest man in the world.